Welcome to The Old Man and the Three Things, presented by Dick's Sporting Goods with JJ Redick and the Dunker Spot. Fellas, how we doing today?
Doing pretty well. Happy to talk some hoop. Exciting times in basketball, period. So happy to be here.
Same, bro. Same. Quick stopover in New York for me on my way from Boston to Dallas. But we're getting it in. All right, let's talk first two games of this NBA Finals. I think there's a lot that we can sort of get into, a lot of things that are, I think, particularly important, a lot of maybe not even predictions, but thoughts on how Dallas can get back in this series. But I want to start with just a general statement. And Doris touched on this in the Open yesterday. Of course, it came up again throughout the game. It is very cool, regardless if they win this series or not. It is very cool to watch a basketball team play like a basketball team. And by that, I mean, it is with the Boston Celtics, it really is about the strength of the group, the strength of the collective. They are conceptually very disciplined in what they try to do. I mean, Joe Mazzulla talked about their game one was as good as they've played all year in terms of executing a game plan and the attention to detail. But within that and those concepts and the game planning, there's a freedom and a level of trust in allowing guys to play to their instincts that I think we see time and time again, particularly with Jaylen Brown, Jrue, Derek White. It's a fun thing to watch. And this is not, Dallas Mavericks fans, this is not me shitting on your team. This is not me saying you aren't going to win this series. If you were up 2-0, I would start today's episode talking glowingly about you. But you're not. You're down 2-0. So I'm going to talk about the Celtics to start. And those are my initial thoughts on the Celtics. What stands out for you guys after two games?
I think for me, going big picture first, it's just the way that Boston has been able to dictate terms on both ends of the floor. This has very much felt like a Boston series. And I know we're going to get into some of the smaller details and things like that, but the way that the Jays in particular have just put their heads down through the first two games of the series. And the efficiency numbers on those drives aren't particularly great. Solid, very good in game one, not so much in game two. But their intention and their consistency in saying, we are putting you in rotation, or we are getting 2 feet in the paint and seeing what you're going to do about it. 66 drives in game two for Boston per second spectrum. Their regular season high was 55. 66 is absolutely their postseason high. And then the other thing I looked at just in terms of Boston putting Dallas in rotation, just how many closeouts have been defended. Boston has defended 50 in 2 games. I think it was 56 in game two for Dallas. Just their ability to scramble Dallas to that degree. And this is with Dallas making tweaks into game two, and I'm sure we'll talk about those. The fact that they have still been able to just put 2 in the paint and to zoom out to what Joe Mazzulla feels, we want to win the math battle. We want to get the threes up in particular. But the fact that they were able to win the paint and the three-point arc has been phenomenal. And then against Luka, like, they largely just have not put 2 on the ball against him through the first 2 games of the series. They've really been able to curtail the types of shots that Dallas has been able to generate on top of that. So I've just been really impressed with how they put their fingerprints on the series so far.
I think to bounce off what y'all have said, it's just the mindset for Boston overall as a unit to understand the assignment and to execute the game plan on both ends. Offensively, you mentioned the drives. Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown have nailed those, but it hasn't always been the first drive. You know, I think you heard Joe Mazzulla in game one saying we don't have to hit a home run on the first drive. It's the second drive. It's the third drive. It's the commitment to keeping them in rotation and getting the best shot possible. I think that they have been really measured in trusting each other and knowing, you know, Jayson Tatum seeing that late help, even if Dallas is trying to navigate and put different personnel down there. I'm going to drive. I'm going to force you to commit. We're going to play out of that. We're going to keep things going. Jrue Holiday's cuts off ball, putting guards in the dunker spot, like just executing over and over and over again to where it doesn't feel like you've moved them. And then defensively, you mentioned the mindset to say, hey, Luka, Kyrie, we're going to switch, go one-on-one. You saw in that game, too, actually, whether it was Derek White helping at the elbow when Porzingis was in a drop or Jrue Holiday helping off Josh Green, we actually will show some help. And we'll commit to this drive and make you make that pass. And we'll just poke at that. So I think the overall mindset is Boston has set their terms. And if this is the type of series it's going to be tough for Dallas to get back in it because Boston's been so committed to the mission.
I think when you look at the start from Kyrie and the start from Luka, to not overreact to the hot shooting to start and start putting 2 on the ball. I mean, Luka had it going and had Peyton Pritchard on him at the foul line, and he calmly just turned around and shot right over him. And there wasn't like the next play, all of a sudden Boston is blitzing. They are very committed to this game plan. Now, Joe has said, and he'll say this about any game plan, he talked about it, different times when I had a Knicks game and we were talking about Brunson, and he's the second most blitz player in the league, right? Time and score can dictate some game planning within the game. And so there was at times 2 on the ball, particularly in the second half with Luka. The one thing that I just, Dallas has to be able to make someone outside of Luka has to be able to make an above the break 3.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure you can win this series unless you start making above the break 3s. And of course, we want Kyrie to be that guy. He hasn't shot well so far. But Josh Green, PJ Washington, Derrick Jones Jr. Think about the very first offensive possession Dallas had of this series in game 1. Derrick Jones Jr. made an above the break 3. We haven't seen a lot of that. We haven't seen a lot of that from anybody on Dallas. And so, Jason Kidd, when he was talking about when they get into their rotations, he was talking about that first pass out. They want to actually funnel the ball to the corner, so then the swing pass is to the above the break. Boston's just saying, no, just catch it above the break and just shoot it, have it. We're just not we are committed to not giving up this corner. I think, with Luka, it's interesting. I started with the collective. You guys brought up the game planning stuff. It's interesting. I don't want to get into this narrative of like it's Luka and the best player normally wins the best series, but Boston is the best team. I think what is interesting through the first 2 games is that there are limitations to any great player and the impact they can have when you go against another great team. There are limitations to that. Certainly Luka missed some free throws and the turnovers. He talked about that. But, man, this guy's having to generate so much in both games, and it's still just – by the way, I think he controlled pace in both games. I think at times Dallas did look to play faster in early offense with throw-aheads or PJ Washington pushing or Kyrie pushing. I just think there's limitations because there's no – you think about the playoffs and pushing on pressure points and trying to prod holes in weak spots, just not a lot there with Boston. There's just not a lot there. To lose that game, and if you kind of do all the numbers, where's the biggest margin? Honestly, it was like you missed too many free throws and Boston didn't. In some ways, I don't want to simplify it, but in some ways, statistically, that's what it is. For Boston to shoot, I think they were 4 for 21 on open three-pointers. To shoot that poorly from 3 and still win with Luka having a 30-point triple-double, man, it's going to be tough. Guys, for Dallas, let's go to the bright spots because there were some bright spots.
I think for Dallas, the first thing that stood out to me as we saw how much success Boston had in the game 1 with having Jrue Holiday or Derek White in the dunker spot, they did feel more intentional about keeping Daniel Gafford in particular closer to the basket, having some pass-offs there. Whoever's in the corner against them, like, I will just stay here. Sometimes that is Al Horford. Sometimes that's Kristaps. Sometimes that's just Jrue Holiday, but I'm staying right here. So they did at least try to limit some of that, and the efficiency on those pick and rolls were lower in game 2 versus game 1 when I looked that up. And then a smaller thing for me, brought it up on the game 1 reaction pod, with Boston bringing so much of the full court pressure, just the backcourt pressure against Luka. It did feel like they were more intentional about some of the early hit aheads, or, okay, fine, we'll just let PJ Washington bring this ball up. There was a late turnover in the fourth quarter with PJ doing a little bit too much against Jrue Holiday, but overall, Let's get some quicker outlets so we can at least have a chance to get into our offense versus spending 6 seconds with Luka dealing with Jaylen Brown. Now we're trying to poke at whatever matchup it is with Boston, switching the way that they were in game one in particular with some of the pre-switching that we saw when they were trying to get Kristaps in action. Let's at least try to cut down some of our time in terms of the possession count. And then just with Luka in general, like he just had it going inside the arc early on. Really set the tone there. So it was nice to see if this is the game plan, if you're not going to show this kind of help, and as Steve mentioned, they did start sprinkling some more in and being really diligent about that. But if this is the game plan, I'm not looking to find a balance right now. I'm just going to hit you and hit you and hit you and hit you and hit you until you do something else. So at least you can take some solace in Luka kind of taking on the channels there.
It felt like Dallas's battleground to win this series in that first quarter. It felt like their defense was more comfortable. Nekias mentioned how they worked to try and fix their rotations, keep size in the paint, and take away the dunker spot. But it felt like the second and third efforts were better, or at least more consistent. There was more effort to, okay, we switch, you drive, I'll just take this drive, now we'll flow back out. You saw more of those consistent plays. The rotations felt more decisive as far as, okay, whoever's in the low man, if Lively or Gafford switches onto Tatum or Brown, force that left, Luka go ahead and pull over, and now we'll play out of it, and we'll trust that we can make the rotations over and over again. So to have that difference between game one and game two, I think is key, because in game one, it felt like Dallas was all over the place defensively. Boston was able to get whatever rotation they wanted out of Dallas, and they played out of it. Now you kind of have more of that automatic we've seen from Dallas in this run, so that's a plus for them. I also think offensively, PJ Washington looked to be more aggressive at the start. I'm going to try and put my head down and drive. I'm going to try and take some of these threes, maybe mix in a post up. That's a positive. I think, you mentioned Luka. Kyrie had some pretty good drives early. And so if he can now get paint touches, I think that's key. Like if we're talking about how do you shift Boston, how do you get them in rotation, I think Dallas has to find a way to get drives. Above the break threes, key. But can we mix in some drives? Can we get someone to help? Can we commit and score some points that way? So I think if Dallas can defend at a certain level, they give themselves a chance. And I think when JJ mentioned how Joe Mazzulla said time and score dictate things, if it's a fourth quarter close game and you have Luka playing at this level and maybe Kyrie's playing at a different level, there is an opportunity there. So if you're Dallas, you just have to figure out how to get there. I think the defense is going to give you wiggle room offensively. If this is a series now where Boston feels more comfortable helping off PJ Washington or Green or Dare Jones, you go back to the same question we've asked all playoffs. Can you make them pay? They start to make them pay, things might feel a little different.
Yeah, you bring up the sort of end game stuff. Can we get to that portion of the game and have some semblance of I don't know, whether it's control because you had the lead or you're within striking distance because it's a one possession game. Think about when Jrue and Derek get that steal. Jrue hits the three. Right after that, Derek White hit his three, and it felt like curtains, right? And Boston goes to the stagnant. Let's try to find Tatum. Let's get him the ball, and it's like 2 or 3 really bad possessions in a row. And then all of a sudden, again, it becomes like a 5-point game. So I think Dallas has to feel good. Like if we can get to the last 5 minutes and have Luka and Kyrie close it, they have to feel like they have an advantage. And look, Jaylen, he had the big lefty lay. Of course, Derek White gets the block on PJ Washington. But I do think Dallas still feels comfortable in that setting, particularly after the way those last few minutes went offensively for Boston. My big question to you is this. We talk about rotations. I agree with you, Steve. Dallas's rotations were much better. Their second efforts were much better. Some of it was Boston missed shots. And I feel like even in reviewing tape, it would be like, oh, this rotation's good. But like these are NBA guys. Like you can rotate your ass off and they can drill a three, right? They still created, I think it was 39 threes, correct? They still created 39 threes. I think I'll just say it. I'm not sure Dallas, we can make any adjustment. We can be great in rotations. We can make some above the break threes. I don't know that Dallas can win 4 of the next 5 if they can't stay in front of the fucking basketball. And the blow-by rate right now, across the board, extremely high. Luka's blow-by rate, also very high. It feels like whenever they want, they can get certain guys on the basketball, and Luka being one of them, get past that person and get 2 on the basketball, finish at the rim, get fouled, spray, get out in rotation. If you can't stay in front of the basketball with that spacing, I think you're going to have a hard time winning 4 out of 5.
I think that's extremely fair, and it makes sense. I have a question to bounce off that.
Okay.
If you're Dallas, do you look at the first 2 games and start to dial the help back a little bit and put Boston in a scenario where, okay, you now feel like this is an automatic driving kick for you. We work better to contain the ball, but we also just try and contest, try and stay at home, try and get back out to those sprays. Is that something that they could mix in to try and keep Boston off balance, or is this just the terms of the series?
Tatum missed, I know he missed at least 3 where they brought a help defender and he missed a layup. You know, he made a midair adjustment or reversed it and he missed a layup. He may have missed 4. That's 8 points if you don't bring the help defender. The one time where it gets a little is when they go to the wing ISO and they bring the guard into the strong side dunker spot, right? I think there's a way to sort of like manipulate that a little bit. But even Jrue and Derek, they're so good at sort of relocating out of that. Game 1, Jrue had 2 or 3 baskets around the rim just on strong side dunker spot in isolation. Otherwise, if you're sort of like, let's say the same spacing, Jayson Tatum gets middle and you're just like showing help but getting out to shooters, I'm confident Jayson Tatum's going to finish at the rim. Right? If you're not going to really commit to the help. I think they played 14 possessions of zone from February 10th to the end of the regular season. Then there was the one game in the Oklahoma City Thunder series where they played like 31 possessions. Is zone an option? Like, I think it's ball containment. It's ball containment. That's the key to this whole thing for Dallas.
Yeah, like it's so funny that Steve, you posed the question because I was actually talking to a friend about this after the game last night. Like it's tough not to send the kind of early help against Boston. One, just because of how good they are, but because of the way that they manipulate the spacing. And I have like this Jaylen Brown possession in my head to where they go early pick and roll, get a switch, and Jaylen like gets Derrick Jones Jr. To his right is Jayson Tatum in the strong side corner, thus PJ Washington is on him on this case. To his left, because the screen was just set, is Kristaps Porzingis with Derek Lively defending him. Jaylen Brown just beats Derrick Jones Jr. off the dribble, which to JJ's point, the containment has to be better. Your low man is Luka. Like Boston has done such a good job of removing size away from the basket that if you do want to go with the game plan of let's switch, Dallas doubled down on their switching. Highest switch rate of any game this season, postseason or regular season for anyone. For Boston in that game, for Dallas in that game too. Like there is just a press the do better button portion to this to where you just have to guard your yard a little bit better. Like as we saw with some of the switches with Derek Lively in particular in the game too. And I think Steve already referenced some of the defensive tweaks that Dallas made. Like Derek Lively being more diligent about I am shading Jayson Tatum to his left or whichever side has 2 players on it. So if you are going to beat me, you're only going to beat me this way where there are extra bodies. Like you can lean more into that stuff. But Boston is just so good at moving their pieces around. Like it kind of puts you in a position where you have to send help. Because if not, if I win this drive, it might just be Kyrie rotating down at the rim. It might just be Josh Green rotating down at the rim versus a Derek Lively or a Daniel Gafford because of how they move the guys around. So I don't know. Like conceptually, I agree. You can probably loosen the shackles, especially where Jayson Tatum is, taking and making jump shots at this level right now. It just hasn't fallen for him. But it's hard not to when they can move your sides away.
What was
the tough part?
Hold on. What was the game? There was the Golden State Warriors in the regular season that said we're just going to play help defense off of Jaylen Brown.
Jaylen Brown, yeah.
What if Jason Kidd did that off Jayson Tatum? And it was like, even when he had the ball, just like gave him like a Ben Simmons treatment. Just shoot your jumper, dude.
Well, I mean, hey, Jaylen Brown's the best player anyway, so maybe that's
I'm not suggesting this is a real thing, but I'm just saying, like, J Kidd, the mind games with J Kidd are very real. Steve, sorry to interrupt. What were you gonna say?
Oh no, you're good. I think it also the scary part if you're Dallas is Boston not only is committed to the spacing, they have variance. Like Jrue Holiday putting up like a Shaq stat line, like 26 and 11, shooting 11 to 14. Not necessarily what you had on your bingo card, but now is it a big Derek White 3 game? Is it an Al Horford 3 game? Does Porzingis turn back up? Does Jayson Tatum hit shots and hit drives? That's where the concern level is for me with Dallas, where yes, there are things you can correct to fix this, but now if the problem changes, what are you prepared to do about that? And Boston hasn't cooperated as far as we're going to bog down a lot. I thought the first half, it was very much 14 on the clock. What are you guys doing? Where are we going? But they corrected that. And if Boston's not going to get in their own way, it makes it tough for Dallas.
Yeah. Anything else you guys want to add from the first 2 games as we look forward to game 3 on Wednesday night?
I think for me is both a comment and a question as I think about what Dallas is trying to get to offensively, particularly with like the Luka or the Kyrie pick and rolls. Like the pick and roll attack in general just hasn't been very good, at least by the numbers. And you can kind of see, again, Boston trying to keep things 2v2. They're being selective with where they're sending help and when they're sending it, things like that. With the empty side stuff in particular, it's felt very bland. It's been very ineffective. And I just kind of look at, one, they'll have Derek Lively or someone else in the dunker spot if Luka's going into the let's get a guard to screen for me bag. So you have a big there, which means Boston has their size at the rim, which kind of limits what you can get out of that action, on top of Boston deciding to just switch sometimes. I'm just kind of wondering at what point when do we see some pin-ins from Dallas? When do we see something on the opposite end of the floor, especially in light of the lack of corner threes that they've been able to generate through 2 games? Like, it has been kind of weird that Boston has been this intentional about taking away the lob opportunities, again, just generally loading up when they can and protecting the corner threes. Like, I'm kind of waiting on that from Dallas. Is that something that's popped for you when watching these first 2?
Well, I do think they ran some off-ball stuff last night for Luka that was really interesting. It's a little bit like that old Dirk play. You know, Luka's on the right block. He gets a pin down from the foul line area and he can pop up top, or he gets the baseline screen on the left side and can pop out to the corner. He had a corner 3 in the first half. They ran it in game 1 as well. Boston fucked up the switch. Luka missed a wide open 3 at the top of the key. Maybe I want some more of that for Kyrie off the ball. You know, I think getting a little more movement. I actually thought going into after game 1 that there was some good stuff on the clear side ISOs. I didn't see that same sort of success in game 2. They did have a ton of success in game 1 attacking Porzingis in ball screens with Luka as the ball handler. 11 possessions, 1.6 points per possession. I don't have the updated stats from last night with Porzingis as the screener's defender versus Luka. I think there's stuff they can get to. There's matchups they can attack. You know, I think the PJ Washington versus Derek White thing is potentially a real advantage for Dallas on either post ups, duck ins. He's had a couple drives where he's just muscled through them. So there's some juice that they can get to beyond just pick and roll and target hunting. Anything additional, Steve?
The Porzingis minutes against Dallas is like as they get like Luka plus Kyrie plus second unit intrigue me, because I don't know how much they can get to Porzingis, because he's really just like, okay, that's fine. Maxi Kleber, you're okay. Go ahead and pop. Or I'm guarding a non-shooter. And then he ends up protecting the rim. And then Dallas doesn't score for like 2 minutes. So that's something I'm keeping an eye on. It was very odd to see Luka and Kyrie kind of go off with 21 points on 9 of 12 shooting. But then it's like Dallas has 11 made field goals, 2 assists. So that's where I was like, hey, what do you do? And another salute to Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown. When they get a big on them, it's been quick decision time. Like, I'm going to catch, I'm going to go. I'm not gonna play with it. I'm gonna catch them and go, and we're gonna play out of it. So those will probably be my last additions.
Okay. All right. Well, I will be traveling to Dallas later and calling games 3 and 4 in Dallas, and then we got Game 5 back in Boston a week from today. Guys, always fun catching up with you, and let's hope we can get a fucking series here. Let's go.
Would be nice.
All right. Talk to you guys soon.